Hey there YouTube, welcome back to the Allegheny Northern and my absolute cluster of a workbench. And today we are going to be talking about adding sound to a non-sound locomotive. Now, I've been putting this off for a little bit because, well, one, I was expanding the layout and that took priority, didn't have time for this sort of detailed work. And two, I'll be honest with you, it scared me a little bit because we're not dealing with inexpensive products here, right? We have a very expensive locomotive, we have a very expensive decoder, and oh yeah, we have a very expensive program that talks between the internet and the decoder and the locomotive, and yeah. So when some idiot decided to buy DC locomotives instead of DCC locomotives when they first came out, I'm now stuck cleaning up that idiot's mess. And today I'm going to show you how we fix that mistake. Now, this is one of the original GEVOs. It was the first series of locomotives that Scale Trains put out in N scale. It was the first time, it was the love at first sight sort of deal. When I opened it up out of the package, saw how awesome the details were. And then we moved forward and the layout went DC, and then it went DCC and sound, and these poor locomotives sort of got left behind. Now they've been on the layout, they've been running in DC under what, a stealth mode, a quiet mode, but it's time to get them upgraded. So we're going to fix this mistake and we're going to get them upgraded. Now to do this, you're going to need some basic tools. You're going to need a series of small screwdrivers, both Phillips and flathead. So you're going to need a pair of tweezers. You are going to need a hobby knife. And you are going to need a pair of wire cutters, which we are going to use improperly, but given the size of the wires, you'll understand why. The last thing you're going to need is a soldering iron, which you can tell is on, and it is heating things up. And yes, it's got a very fine tip on it because you are going to be doing some very fine tip work. If you suck at soldering, this is something you should practice before you try doing this because you have some very small parts. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not the greatest solderer in the world. It is definitely a skill, and I'm more of a bull in the china shop than I am a precision person when it comes to soldering. So that part scared me just a little bit too. Now, I have picked the Scale Trains locomotive to start with and to show you because it is by far the easiest locomotive I can think of to upgrade. It's already made to receive a sound decoder, and it already has the cutout for the speaker. So you pretty much just need to get the parts, install the parts, and then do the programming stuff afterwards. But I want to show you that process because if you can understand the basics, then you can go from there and you can do something that's a little more complicated, something that needs a frame modification, etc., etc. So let's get started with this project. So let's get started here. Obviously, I took the locomotive out of the box first. If you didn't figure that out, this video might be a little bit too advanced for you. But take the locomotive out of the box. And if you're going to do a video on this, please don't show us taking the locomotive out of the box. I don't know why unboxing videos became popular. Yes, we know that all products come in boxes, and yes, you do have to take the product out of the box before you can use it. So just don't. But now we got to get the locomotive open here, and you know what? They have screwed these things on here so tight. I don't know. They've actually stripped them. Well, this is going to be fun trying to get this out of here. But this is sort of a first step, and we absolutely have to get these screws out of here. So I don't know how we're going to do that because I've never opened it, and these screws are stripped. So we're going to go on to some advanced techniques here, I think. Okay, the advanced technique was take a flathead screwdriver and put it in the Phillips head side that's not stripped and pull it out. That's kind of odd. I didn't have that issue with the other one, but here we are. Okay, so do not do unboxing. Moral of the story. And am I not going to get this trick to work twice? Oh, yes, I am. Okay, good. And then I dropped the screw. So let's hope that just fell right down in front there, because I was going to use this fuel tank as a place to hold my little tiny screws. which is a good practice, folks. If you are working on a locomotive, that you have someplace that you can store your screws, and otherwise you'll end up dropping them and then losing them, and then you won't have them, and they're obviously specialty screws, so you won't have a replacement. And boy, it really just goes downhill after that. So, all right. You do have to be very careful. There's a lot of small parts on this, obviously, and you just want to remove that part of the fuel tank. Be careful that you don't knock off any of the details, because if you do, then you're also going to be fixing details. Now, this part of the locomotive, as you can see, is already hollowed out here. That's where our speaker is going to go. So that was the easy part. And next, we'll leave these two screws alone. You don't have to touch those, but we do need to get the couplers out of here. And that's because you need to do that to remove the body. Okay, so that little screw that took a dive there off the end of the screwdriver went onto the floor, and that 4 is gone and lost for all eternity. Shouldn't be an issue, but I'm going to show you how we're going to fix it just the same once we get there. I honestly thought it was sitting on the... Oh, you know what? Look, it's right there. It is stuck right there. You discovered it at the same time I did. So that 15 minutes I spent looking all over the damn floor was kind of silly. But I hope this stands as a lesson to you to make sure that you are very careful with these tiny little screws. Okay, so now that we're back on track here, yeah, I guess that's a good way to show you that there's magnetic properties in your motor, right? Okay, we're going to take the couplers off here, and we're going to be very careful with the springs and the screws. And realistically, you shouldn't have any issues with the springs. There's springs on the outside of these couplers that work the knuckle, and if you bounce one of those off, the microtrains coupler screws or springs are kind of close and can kind of be used for that. They look a little bit bulkier, but I did actually go online to try to find a replacement springs for those, because I lost a handful of them on my couplers, and for some reason I couldn't find anyone that offered them. So apparently that's not a side gig that somebody has, is offering tiny little springs for people that bounce tiny little springs all over the place. So yeah, so just FYI, be careful with the tiny little springs, because the likelihood of them getting stuck on the side of your locomotive as well is not good. So okay, I'll bounce these couplers out of here, and I find that using the fuel tank as the storage for all these little tiny pieces is the best way to do it. And make sure you put the fuel tank off to the side where your hands aren't going to be bouncing around. Otherwise, you'll end up knocking the fuel tank over, and instead of losing one screw, you can lose all of them all at one time, which is, you know, that's awesome. You might as well just start from zero. But all right, so now we're on to the fun stuff here, right? And get this coupler box out of here. And with that, now you guys notice I'm using these little foam things here, right? If you have a cradle, a locomotive cradle, that's just as good. I don't, so I sort of improvise. When I get a package that has these little foam things in it, I keep those little foam things because they make great stands for working on, you know, fragile stuff like scale trains, locomotives that you may not want to necessarily have running off the, you know, bouncing off the hard desk surface that you're working on. Okay, so once you carefully remove your scale trains locomotive, take your highly detailed shell and set that off to the side. The last thing you want to do is bounce that off the floor. And you are going to get something that looks a lot like this. Actually, it's going to look exactly like this. And this has the Next 18 connection, which is right there. And when you get the DC version, you will get it's kind of like a dummy board. It looks just like this. And you're going to take that off, and then you're going to put your Next 18 DCC decoder in. And that decoder looks a lot like, you know, this. You know, you're looking at it going, wow, they look pretty close. They do. But this one is blue, and blue is better than green. So, you know, there's that. Also, not digital, if that matters to you. Okay, so it's real easy how this comes out. It just pops right down like that, and then you can dump it out the side, and the socket's on the board. I don't recommend that you remove the whole board to do that. You don't need to. And the more things you take apart, well, one, the more things you have to put back together, but the more things you take apart, just the bigger pain in the ass it's going to be to put everything back. And I see there's this little piece of tape there. I don't know where that came from, but we're taking that off because, surprise, surprise, we're going to need that little solder pad here in a minute. Okay. We're going to set that aside. You can either put it in another locomotive, or you can sell it, or you could just put it in a box and not do anything with it ever again. Your choice. Okay, we are using the ESU speakers. This is, do they have a product number on here? They don't. It's the smallest one they offer. I think it's 9 by 16. Oh, there's a product number. It's right there. 50342. You guys probably saw that before I did. It is a 9 by 16 by 3 millimeter speaker. Millimeter, for those of you here in the U.S., is metric. Nobody really knows what metric is. It's just sort of, you know, unless you're talking about 9 millimeter. Everybody knows what 9 millimeter is, but yeah. So this is the 9 millimeter of speakers, I guess. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take this out of its package. And I found that you don't really, in this install, need these little guys. So actually, they don't even fit if you did need them. So we're just going to put that over here. And your speaker is taped right here. And for right now, actually, we're going to leave it taped on there because I don't want it floating around. Because you see what happens when I have things floating around on my workbench. But you do have 2 solder points right here and right here. So there, right there, and right there. Now, it is very important, that when you are soldering, that the solder goes right there and right there. By the way, magnetic, in case anybody was wondering. That's going to play a key factor later when we're going to solder, because you don't want this thing jumping up and sticking to your soldering iron. So yeah, we're gonna show you that technique. But you don't want to solder anything other than where the solder needs to go. And I know that sounds like, well, duh, but it's very important because you don't want to like accidentally short something out or, you know, screw up the speaker. I know it's a $9 piece, but you know, you screw up enough speakers and it's not $9 anymore. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to install 58828. This is the DCC Micro Loksound. It's a next 18 pin connection, and you get this giant box for just that little decoder. Once again, I'm not doing an unboxing because you know it came in a box, and I'm not going to show you how it comes out of the box, but take it out of the box. Okay, they give you this little Loksound sticker. I don't know why. I don't know what you're actually supposed to do with it. I think it's just in there because, you know, it's in there. So I'm trying to think of a way in which I could like put this over someone's mouth when they're in a meeting. I don't know, but all right, let's go and get this little guy out of here. And so you got to be careful with anything electronic, right? Like you don't want to unnecessarily handle it more than you need to, because you're running the risk of maybe having a static charge or something that's going to discharge onto this thing and fry something. And I know that sounds like, well, it might happen, it might not happen. And if it does happen, you really won't know until you go ahead and plug it in and nothing works. So yeah, it's a little tricky, but in general, even though this is highly electronic, and yes, it is fragile and gentle, and you should handle it as such, you're not going to break it by handling it. Okay, I mean, if my Gorilla handling can handle it, I'm sure you're going to be just fine. Now, it's very important that when you push this into the next 18 connection, you get it seated all the way, because here's a surprising fact: if it's not plugged in, it won't work. So it will just sit right up in there. But see, now I'm on this side. Now you can't see that because you're looking at my hand. Here, yeah, you'll see that I'm on this side right here. But if you go to this side, you'll see that I'm popped out, all right? And so that is not a good connection. And now we'll play the game where we push one side in, then we push the other side in, and they keep falling out and all that. But if you hold both sides, you can kind of push it right up into there. Okay. So once you do that, your decoder is set. Now, something I'm going to point out to you here is this board is just a little bit wider. See how I can see it up under there? And that is going to play a little bit of havoc when you put this shell on. So if you somehow manage to bounce this out and drop it just a little bit, then it won't be connected anymore. And yeah, surprise, surprise, it's not going to work. Okay. Scale trains, not only did they give you the cool spot for the speaker, which is awesome, they gave you a little hole right here through the shell that you can fish your wires up through. And then there's a little hole right here to fish your wires through. And then there's these two little holes right here on the board. I don't know if they're for this purpose, but I like my wiring nice and neat, because when wiring is not neat and it's just, it's sloppy and everything's all over the place, that drives me nuts. So when I see how nice of a job they did in here, like, that makes me happy. Like, not only did they take pride on the outside, but they took pride on the inside of the locomotive as well. And we are going to do the exact same thing. We're going to keep things nice and neat, wires as short as possible. You don't have a lot of realty in here for extra stuff, so you don't really want extra wires floating around. Okay, for wires, we are using NCE wiring because it's what I found, and Ultraflex. There's 10 foot of it in here. 10 foot does a lot of locomotives in N scale. And you're wondering, where the hell is it? Yeah, see, it's hidden back there. It's stealth wire. But that's the green wire. And now, yes, there is a wiring code for locomotives. And speakers are black and red, I believe. Don't hold me on to that, but I think that's what it is. And, well, of course, I don't have black and red. So we're going to use white and blue, because that's what I have. Yes, I also have green, but green's already in there, and I didn't see white and blue in here anywhere other than on that little motor contact. So, yeah, we're going to use white and blue. And look, if I was doing this for somebody, I would stick with the NMRA standard and all that stuff. But the chances of me ever selling a Scale Trains locomotive, yeah, it's if it's not zero, it's like real close to zero, like maybe 0.0001%. Not going to do it. So I don't really care what the wire is, so long as it gets the signal from the speaker or from the decoder to the speaker. So, all right, we're going to set our locomotive aside here because we are focusing on the speaker now. And I'm going to start with this mess of blue wiring. Yes, in case you're wondering, I'm going to save the little bag from the speaker to put this wire back into, because loose wire of this size is going to get lost in here somewhere. Okay, so I tried a couple of things. One, I tried to shave the wire insulation off with a modeling knife, and what I ended up doing is the wire is so small and so fine, I actually ended up cutting it. So that was sort of a pain. Then I went, all right, well, maybe somewhere on this super duper wire cutter, I have the right size wire. No, I do not. This wire is too small. I'm sure somebody out there made a super tiny little wire cutter thing, but I don't have that super tiny little wire cutter thing. I have this one. And so I'm going to use the actual wire cutter part to strip off just the tiniest. See a little bit of copper there? That is all I'm stripping off of this thing. Not a bit more. And the reason I'm doing it that way is because I don't want any extra wire floating around in here. I'm going to make that little connection to the little solder pads and to the on the speaker, and that is it. So I don't want any more wire on there than I absolutely need to. And I did this backwards on the last one that I did. So I tried to fish the wire up under the board and through here, and with tweezers I was able to do it, but I'm going to see if doing it down this way is easier. Oh yeah, it's a lot easier. That's not even close. So I'm going to grab it and come here. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to grab it. You know, maybe it wasn't easier. There we go. Got it. Okay. You don't have to fish it through this little hole. I don't even know if that little hole was for this purpose. I'm doing it because I'm somewhat anal about it. So then I'm going to feed it down through here where it's supposed to go. And that's going to be a fool's errand, because after we solder this thing, we're going to have to pull the wire back out through to get it nice and tight. but I'm just showing you where it goes. Now I'm showing you where it goes, and let's just get this in here. You know, I swear this shouldn't be the hard part of the process, but boy, is it making it look like it is. Just don't want to go in the hole. And sometimes that happens. Okay, so, all right, it's not going in the hole. We're going to leave it outside the hole. We're going to stick it down into this hole, into the speaker chamber, and there we are. All right, that's going to be our working platform here for the minute. Okay, back to our speaker, right? We're going to take it off of the tape that is holding it to this little cardboard dealie. And then we're going to take that off of here. All right. Solder, right? This little pull tab, that releases an adhesive. There's an adhesive backing under there that we are going to use to stick this speaker in here and mount it. If you do what would be conventional and you would think, oh, okay, well, I'm soldering the top, I want that to be up there on the wires. Yeah, you're going to be wrong on that. Because it wants to go this way. So make sure you have enough wire to do that. There's enough space in there, so you're not going to have that issue. And yeah, that's just the way it's gonna go down. Now I'm gonna leave this one out of the way here, and we're gonna go ahead and get set up for soldering. I think I'm actually gonna bring you overhead, because if I leave you here, you're going to keep seeing the backside of my hand, which I'm sure isn't nearly as interesting as what I'm working. Okay, so soldering. You have two sides, you have two wires. This is one of those cases where it does not matter which wire goes to which side. There are certain situations where multiple speakers are involved, and some other speakers where it may be you have to take this wire to that port and whatnot. These locomotives don't have that. It can go anywhere you want it to go. As long as it's this tab to the tab on the board and this tab to the other tab on the board, then you can make it go wherever you want it to go. Okay. The idea is nice thin electric solder. You're going to hold your speaker in place, because if you don't, it's going to jump up and it's going to attach itself to your soldering tip. We want to get just enough of a touch here to... It's a little awkward. Don't burn your finger doing this, because it hurts. But we want to get just enough of a touch here to get the solder to melt and to attach itself to the speaker, and not a second of heat more, because in case you didn't notice, electronics do not like heat, and they don't like water either. So, but I don't know why you'd have water here unless you have your coffee off to the side. Don't spill your coffee on your electronics. And then we are going to make a very similar connection here. Now that we've got our little wire, we're dealing with very small parts and pieces, right? Very small parts and pieces. So there is no need for you to have any kind of extended duration of heat. Make sure your tip is clean. That's soldering tip. I mean, it's good life advice in general, but soldering tip. Make sure your tip is clean, and just very briefly touch this right like so. And the solder is going to flow naturally, and it's going to make a connection. And guess what? You're done. Well, you're done with that one. You got to do it again. And the left side is the same as the right side. Not necessarily in politics, but definitely in wiring in this case. And we're going to simply repeat what we did. So it's not terrible to get this thing installed. Now, here's the part that's a little bit nerve-wracking, right? You don't really know if you screwed up until the end. And that's when you find out, hey, I did a good job, or hey, something's not right. And something might not be right because, well, you could have a bad decoder, you could have a bad speaker, you could have a bad wire, or you could have just screwed it up somewhere. And you aren't going to know which one it is until you go through your fault tree and try to solve it. So, yeah, it's not. It's a little nerve-wracking. Now, the decoder in this case is going to run you about $100. The speaker is going to run you about 8 or 9. So, for it's called 110. You're going to have Uncle Sam in there. You're going to have some shipping if you're not picking it up in the store and all that. So, you're going to be a little over 100. Let's say maybe 125 bucks. Okay, to do this. And I bought this locomotive for I think 125, maybe 115. So when you take the 115, 125, then you add 125 or 115 in the decoder and all that, and then you factor in the cost of the software that we're going to use here in a minute, on a per locomotive basis, depending on how many locomotives you've done, you're not saving anything by not having a factory installed. So, I mean, if you're one of those people that I like installing my own decoders and yada, 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 in this instance, the price point does not make any sense. It just doesn't. It doesn't save you anything. You're spending just as much, plus you're having the time to do this, and it's just like, wow, that was sort of a giant waste. So, yeah, if you're going to do sound, just do sound. I guess is my advice. And so the issue that I found that doing it backwards this way makes it easier to go through that hole, but if you misjudge your wire length, now you're trying to pull it back through, and that sort of sucks. So I guess it doesn't matter which way you go, but yeah. So we're trying a new format here, right? Like you're getting my musings while I'm doing this. So this is what bounces around in my cranium while I'm doing this shit on the railroad, and sometimes it's a little more random than this. At least I'm staying somewhat focused to the model train. Sometimes it bounces to other things. This speaker bounces to anything it wants to stick to, but we're gonna see how that goes. Some of you probably turned the sound off right now, which that's fine too, I guess. Which is pretty much what I would probably tell you to do if you didn't like what I was saying anyway. Turn the sound off. But then you'd miss all the commentary and miss everything that I'm doing, and then I don't know why you're watching the video to begin with. So, whatever works for you. And yeah, I'm on 3 cups of coffee too, if you didn't notice. So, might have pinched that just a little bit too tight there, and actually cut it instead of stripping it. And we're gonna. There we go. All right. Only took 3 tries. That's not bad. And then we're going to repeat this process as soon as I find out what the hell I do with my solder. No, it's on the floor. Okay. I'll let you watch me do this again, because soldering is fun, right? And I'm going to turn this around again, just because I need to use my finger to hold the speaker in place so it doesn't attach itself to the soldering iron. All right. And yes, so when you get your solder, it keeps focusing on my hand, so you're not seeing that, you're seeing my freaking hand. So for those of you who are watching my hand constantly, feel free to rate my hand out of 10, because that's what I think you've seen most of this video. All right. Actually, I can't use that because I'm not going to able to hold the speaker in place. Okay. Anyway, what I was saying is when you see the solder ball up like that, that's a cold solder joint, and that just means that the solder got hot, so it melted, but the little metal thing that you were soldering it to did not get hot. because maybe the soldering iron wasn't on it enough, so the solder didn't flow, just kind of balled up there when you touched it, and that's actually not a good joint. So it should look a little more flat like that. It should look like a I don't know what the hell it looks like. It should not look like a ball, I guess, is the moral of the story there. Okay. All right. And so if we did this correctly and didn't suck, which we did not, it doesn't look like, you know what, that wire is like off to the side. We did suck. All right, we gotta fix this. Okay, errant wire is not good in small electronics. It's not good anywhere, but it's definitely not good in small electronics. And I can't see what I'm doing because the freaking camera's in the way. And the wire got a little warm, and now it's so flexible I can't keep the damn thing straight. So that's not helpful either. All right, hold on. Sorry, that was me bumping the camera, obviously. My wires became a little bit frayed here. And so the reason I pulled that apart, I don't know if you saw it or not, but the reason I pulled it apart was because the wire had pulled apart a little bit, and that meant that we were going to have the chance that a small piece of the wire would come in contact with something it wasn't supposed to come in contact with. And that wasn't a. I don't know what happened here, but we're gonna start this process over again because clearly, it's not going well. All right, take 2 or 3. I don't know what take we're on. All right, that was painful. Let me check and make sure I got a good connection here. Oh, check and make sure I got a good connection here. Yep, make sure I got solder only where I needed solder. Yep, no, that's not connected. Okay, we're good. All right. Okay, now at this point we can go ahead and install our speaker, because if it worked, then everything is perfect. If it didn't work, well, we're gonna have to rip it back out anyway and get a new one. So I'm fairly confident we can pull the backing off of that and get this thing in here. Now, it's going to want to flip on you, and it's going to want to put the wrong side against the body of the locomotive. It's going to want to put this back side where the wires are. So, you just got to be somewhat gentle with it. Make sure you got enough wire down here to make this rotation. Otherwise, you'll end up pulling the soldering off, and then you'll have to redo that, which I know is not a huge problem, but like you can see, like it doesn't see how it doesn't want to stick that way. um, that's just a fun thing. But yeah, it wants to go the other way. It wants to, but it's not the boss of me, and I'm not letting it go that way. So we're going to put it in the way it's supposed to go in. Nope, stop. Okay. And then you just push it there, and then once it's taped, it sort of just chills out because it's taped. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and clean up our wires so that we don't have this mess under here. And they are fighting each other for space to get through here. don't know why. There's plenty of space for everybody. All right. You know what? Close enough. And then we're going to take this wire and we are going to tuck it into this little wire holder location that they have on here for us. And you'll notice that there's some other wires that they installed that are already in there. So we're just kind of piggybacking off of that. And now very gently we are going to pull the excess wire back through the hole. Be very careful, because if you break the wire, yep, you're starting all over again. You can't really splice it in here. So, I mean, you really wouldn't want to anyway. But you're either doing it right or you're starting over. All right, make sure you're grabbing just the wire you're intending to pull, so that you're not pulling some other random stuff out. Okay, so when we're done with that, we've got a nice little install there. Speakers coming up through and up onto here. Now, this is the nice part. There are contacts on the decoder that you could connect your speakers to. However, Scale Trains in their infinite wisdom gave you two tiny soldering pads right here and here. They are LSA and LSB. All right, now here's the part where some of you are going to freak out, because it's the part where I freaked out. You've got to solder on the board, and it's very important that you don't overheat it. It's also very important that you do not get solder on things that are not those solder pads. So you can see how much wire I need. I'm going to give myself a little extra length that I can work with, just in case I cut it a little too short, or whatever. I do not want to have to pull the wire back out. All right, now here comes the fun part. Time to solder the pad. All right, so we are going to solder this thing here, but first we're going to strip off just a tiny little bit of insulation so that I can, or we're going to cut it, and that's why we leave a little extra length, because sometimes we do stupid things. And there we go. So perfect, just a tiny little bit of wire exposed. And I'm actually going to reposition how I'm sitting, because as much as I want you guys to see this, I also want to see what I'm doing, because the last thing I want to frickin' do is fry a board. Or fry a decoder. Or fry anything. Unless it's chicken. Okay. Little tiny solder pad. And I swear that no matter how fine of a tip you get on your soldering iron, it always seems like it's just massive when you're trying to do this little shit. It's just like, why don't they make a tiny one that just goes right where I want it to go? There we go. One way to skin a cat. That is a lot of solder for this. Here, I'm going to find, I think, that having these tweezers, because I'm not worried about the speaker attaching itself. kind of looked like a cold joint. I wanted to make sure it wasn't. Let's go ahead and put less solder on, because that's freaking horrendous. Oh, that's a big blob too. All right. Once again, it does not matter which way you go as far as A to B and whatnot, because it doesn't matter for this particular assignment. Yeah, our solder ball just rolled off. That is why you don't. Thank God it didn't stick. That is the problem with cold solder. You know, there's enough solder on there now. Actually, I think that's a little more appropriate amount. Perfect. Okay, and if we didn't screw up, we now have one really bad solder joint and one not so bad solder joint. But that is our install. All right, let's go see if we screwed it up. Take it to the next step.